Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Peace. What's up? How are you? Today is Juma. Alhamdulillah. Thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank the Creator for this day, to be able to be alive, to be cognizant, and to be aware. Want to kind of discuss also in line of what I was discussing yesterday about misinformation about Islam and the belief. And first, I would like to say that the Muslims, they do in fact believe in the Injil, the Bible, and also in the Old Testament, the Torah, and the 5 books of Moses, and primarily in the first Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John of the Bible, and believe that John is more authentic, was written more closely to the point of Jesus' life than most of the other books. And we take meticulous views in the fact of what Jesus said versus what Paul or anyone else may have said regarding him, because that is a third person narration that Jesus said. But when it says that Jesus said this and this and this, now in the book of John, as Muslims, we believe sincerely that Jesus was sent by the Most High, was sent by Allah, and that in fact he himself was sent miraculously, and that he will be the primary prophet and being that will come in the last days to fight the Antichrist, and no one else will be able to beat the Antichrist, the Dajjal, the great deceiver, other than the prophet Jesus, or we as Muslims call him Isa. We believe that, and we believe that we'll be fighting on his side. Now, the cornerstone of Islam can be found in the Bible as well, when it says that when the Jews asked Jesus, the Pharisees and Sadducees asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandments of the prophets? Listen to this question. What is the greatest commandments of the prophets? Now, the prophets, we're talking about Moses and Abraham, Isaiah, Jacob, Jeremiah, Joshua. We're talking about the prophets. And the question is, what is the greatest commandments of the prophets? Because Jesus used to get on them all the time, because he would say to them, y'all killed the prophets. You slayed the prophets. And so when they asked him, what are the greatest commandments of the prophets? Not one prophet, but all of the prophets that had been coming for thousands of years. Jesus' response to them was, and this is the cornerstone of Islam. This is the cornerstone. What is the cornerstone? It can be found in the Injil as well. He said, to love the Lord their God with all their heart and with all their soul. That was the first premise of his answer to the Pharisees about what were the greatest commandments of the prophets, of all of the prophets. To love the Lord their God with all their heart and with all their soul. Now, Islam, that's what we teach. Clear and simple. We teach to love God, Allah. We call Allah. And as I said yesterday, different languages have different names. If you're French, you say Dieu. If you're Spanish, you say Dios. German, Gott. And, these are different names for the same being, Allah. We say Allah, and it's unifying, because you can be a Hebrew. You can be a French and say Allah. You can be Swedish and say Allah, and English and say Allah, and that Muslim understands exactly what you mean, the God. So Jesus' first response is to love that Lord, that God, with all their heart and with all their soul. That was his first premise, and that's our premise. Love God, nobody else, nothing else. We love his prophets and we love his messengers, and we attempt our best to try to follow in their footsteps. Now, there is a disconnect between the Islamic community and the Christian community, and theology, especially in Christian theology, is a difference of called a prophetic mission and apostolic mission. And the prophetic mission says that, basically the prophets were, they made all type of mistakes. They made big judgments that was bad. But the apostles who were not even the prophets, were more pure and more righteous. And in the Islamic community, in the Muslim community, we say, no, that's not true. The prophets themselves who were divinely sent by God were more righteous, and they did not make major mishaps. They may have made minor decision-making perspectives that may have appeared to have been big, but they were basically protected. They wasn't infallible, but they were basically blessed, and their whatever thing that may have appeared was minor. Okay, and so that is a difference. That's one of the differences in Islam, because whoever, the word Messiah means to be anointed. Whoever, God anoints, they're not going to be making no big major sins or crimes. They, being human, may have an indiscretion or make a decision that is not, what we might say in everyday terminology of not being perfect. But we believe that the cornerstone of Islam is to love the Lord their God with all their heart and all their soul. That is the first premise, to love God, not to go through another person or another being in order to get to God, because we were born in sin. Yeah, we were born in a sinful society. But the child, the innate nature of the child itself is sinless, because sins come from behavior and actions and words. And when a child comes out the womb, Islamically, the child is pure, because the child has not accrued, has not, the word kasab, has not earned any sin, because the child has done nothing. So therefore the child has not committed a sin. The child may be born into a world full of sin because of the humanity and what we have done as adults, but the child itself is sinless. And that is, one of the views of Islam, that the child is sinless. It's like in psychology, they talk about tabula rasa, which means blank slate. When the child is born with a blank slate. It has none. And even the proof of the pudding is that when you talk about like Baptists and other Christian views, and Islam as well, until the child reaches the age, the young man and the young woman reaches the age of maturity, and in Islam that's 15, some say 14, 15, and in the Baptist community is roughly around the same age, 14, 15, because they're baptized. And the reason of this is that once they get to this particular point that they can make conscientious and conscious decisions on behavior of good and understanding good and evil, good and bad, good and evil, then they become responsible for their own behavior. Up until that point, whatever they do as children, Islamically, is, and I do also believe in the Christian faith, is that those sins, those indiscretions fall on the shoulders and the burdens of the parent. So therefore, they're not held accountable for those particular behaviors by the Most High. Who is held accountable is the parent. And so, with that being said, loving the Lord our God with all our heart and our soul, when they reach that age, the Christian children are baptized in the basically Baptist community, because you have other ones, the Anglicans and the Catholics, they do it when they're children. As soon as they come out, again, that's that paradigm shift between believing the child is born sinful and believing the child is not born sinful. But that is the purpose of the baptism, and that's the purpose of, even many ulama said that once the individual reaches the age of maturity, given jadid, a new shahada, a shahadatain, ashadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, because now they're conscious. They're not just born, inherited Islam. Now they're conscious. They're making a conscious decision that this is the life they want to lead. Now, a lot of people automatically say, "No, you don't have to do that." There are some who say you don't have to do that, but I think the most correct view is that when they get to that particular age of maturity, that they should make a conscious decision, because just to say, well, I was born Muslim and I was born into Islam, there's a lot of Muslims. There's millions of Muslims who don't pray, who don't fast, who don't do nothing, whose behavior is outrageous. There's a lot of Christians likewise, and one of the reasons because they don't make a conscious decision when they get to a certain, and then even then some make conscious decisions and reinstate their shahada. They get their baptism, and they still, choose to go other ways. I mean, that's human nature. But the question is whether or not once they reach the age of maturity, should they do that? Should they just be left alone to their own devices? I'm one who thinks that it would be more beneficial at that particular age for them to, because teaching, grooming, until they get to that age, to teach them and groom them on their obligations as individuals, that their father eyeing their individual obligations as well as their collective obligations. And that goes back into child rearing, that goes back into education, that goes back into all those other things about the family, the tightness of the family. A lot of people don't want to, rock the boat when it comes to their family. But yeah, those are things. And mashallah, if they don't do it, mashallah, and if they do it, alhamdulillah. So Jesus, his whole thing, his first premise was that to love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul. And so as a believer, that's exactly what we believe. We don't believe in, again, if I repeat myself, please forgive me, but we don't believe in that I have to go, I was born in sin, I was born sinful, and therefore I have to go through some another being to do it. No, we believe we were all born pure, and therefore, until we reach the age of maturity, we're not really responsible. And we go, because of that, we can pray directly to God himself. And for our invocations, for our prayers, for our blessings, for our forgiveness, and we go directly to the Most High. After all, the Most High is one who created us. Now, when it comes to the prophet, we believe the prophet's obligations were basically because they had an insight. It's like you depend on you for social work, or you depend on the social work, the scholars of social work. The forerunners. If you are a psychology dependent, you study the sources of the scholars of psychology. If you're a sociologist, you study the references of those sociologists who's supposed to make those major breakthroughs. If you're a business person, you study the business people, so forth and so on. So for the spiritual inclined people who want to be better human beings, then we study the instructions and the references of the prophets to become the best individual that we can be, to be more spiritual, because we are made of, body, mind, and soul. That's the balance, the body, the mind, and the soul. And in saying so, that attachment to the Most High, as I was saying before, is not just a mental situation, is also a spiritual, and it should be an emotional content. When I first became Muslim, I had been Christian and raised in a Christian family, ministers and all. That is my lineage, and therefore, when I became a Muslim, I did much study. I mean, burned the midnight oil. And Islam was intellectual, but I had a vacuum, and the vacuum was my emotional connection. And it took me years to understand that. And I remember one day, and this is a true story. I'll probably be criticized by Muslims for it and everything else, but I really don't care, because this was my journey. And so I had been studying. I'm talking about diligently, burning the midnight oil, studying Quran, studying Hadith, studying Tariq, studying history, studying, akhlaq, morality, all of these different things. But I was missing something I felt in the Jama'at, which was hub, wadud, love, emotional content. So I remember one day not thinking of being a radu, not thinking of being apostatizing or leaving the deen, but I was trying to figure out exactly. So I went to this kanis, this church, and when I went in there, I listened, and when it was over, I went up to the minister and I said to him, I said, I am a Muslim, and my family is Christian, and I wanted to come in here because there is something that both communities, I think, lack in an area. And he said, I thank you for coming. And he was very generous, and he asked me, what is missing? And I shared with him, I believe that what is missing. I said, in my community, we're very diligent at studying, very much so. We study the Quran, we study the Bible, we study the hadith, the honorable traditions of the Messenger of Allah. We study Arabiya, we study. And I said, in that, the Muslims, we are way much farther ahead than the Nasara, the Masiah, the Christians. We are way much more ahead in that because as a collective we study, where in Christianity, basically just the ministers, they study. The followers, the flock, many of them do not. And I said, but y'all have something that we lack, and we have this which y'all lack. And he said, what do y'all lack? I said, we lack the emotional, compassionate component of emotion, ethos, this feeling of fellowship and brotherly love. I said, what happens is that when everything in quantum physics they discuss, two things can't be in the same place at the same time, and a lot of times we give up one thing in order to get another thing. So there's a lot of time consumption in the studying, but there's not a lot of time consumption in the emotional quotient of brotherhood and fellowship. That is not 100%, but for me at that time that was a reality, and I missed that part of sharing emotions. Some intellect actually neutralizes. If you ever watch Spock on Star Trek, he was so intellectual, he didn't have any feelings, and Kirk was like, "Feel, Spock, feel," because he was too logical. And intellect does neutralize emotions, so there has to be again that mizan, that balance. And getting back to my original theme, is the fact that the prophet Jesus said the first of the commandments of all of the prophets. Listen, you can't discount what Jesus said. This is what he said, and this is what he said about all of the prophets. So you can't discount what Jesus said, neither can you discount what all of the prophets taught, because this is what Jesus said they taught. He said that. To love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul. And that was the first premise. The second premise was to treat thy neighbor as to treat thyself. He said, on these two are all of the commandments of the prophets. On these two things. What? Every prophet taught, love God, worship God, and treat your neighbor as you treat yourself. Now, this would be which many would call Iman Mujmal, which is faith in a nutshell. That's just a very summarized, succinct, what the prophet Jesus said. And the Quran is a little bit more mufassal. Mufassal means it's detailed. And mufassal, it means that, in the Quran it says, Tabudu Allah, you worship God. Wabni sabil, Watabuduna dunallah, wabil walid, and ihsan, and be kind to your parents. Yatim, and be kind to the yatim, the orphan, wa miskin, and the working poor, right? And the working poor, and ibn sabil, and the travelers on the way, and the javel, the neighbors who are near and the neighbors who are far. And so in the Quran, it says exactly almost every chapter of the Quran says exactly what Jesus said. and the Prophet Muhammad brought, which was to love God, worship God, respect God, and to respect and honor thy parents, respect and honor the orphan, the one who doesn't have a mother or a father, who is left to their own devices. Respect the working poor, the miskin. Because you have the fakir. The fakir is a person who doesn't have jack, don't have a dime, don't have a job, and is poor. But you have a lot of people who are miskin who are working poor. And the fact of the matter that people think, well, he has a job or she has a job, they okay. Nah, that don't mean they're okay. That means that they work and that they have a good ethic to work, but it doesn't mean that they're not poor. So, miskin. So, you honor the miskin. So, you honor the yatim or the miskin, and you honor the travelers, those people who travel for whatever reason, who are not mukim, who are not settled. And so you respect the traveler, and you respect your neighbor who is near you, neighbor who is far. It's funny because one of the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad said, if you want to know about your brother, ask the neighbors, ask the people around them. They'll tell you what if they're good or bad. Of course, it's not 1,000% because you might have a couple of people that may not like a person and just throw salt on them for, who will be salty for no reason. And then you have, those who are totally honest and they tell you, that person is a good person, or that person is a bad person. That is the first thing I wanted to talk about was, the foundation of Islam and Christianity. The second thing is that the belief that Muslims believe that Jesus was a prophet is not a new thought process. And it's funny, a lot of the Crusades and all this stuff was about, politics and expansion and Jerusalem and all that, a lot of that. But when we're talking about just from a theoretical perspective of the average African American or European American, Hispanic American understanding Islam, I just want to explain that today. And if you have I'm pretty sure most Christians have Bibles, in the Bible, as I said, the Muslims believe that John was the most authentic of the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you look in chapter 40, I think it's chapter 7, verse 40 of the Bible, you'll find that when the Jews were ready to attack Jesus, they became afraid because they noticed the people. And the people was around them, and, and it was like they was afraid if they attacked Jesus, the people would attack them. So they asked the people, how do y'all see him? And one group of the people, while the Prophet Isa, may the peace and blessing of God be upon him who sent him, was there, they said, of the truth, he is the prophet. This is chapter 7, verse 40. It said, of the truth, he is the prophet. Of the truth, he is the prophet. This is what one group said while Jesus, while the Prophet Isa was walking. He was tamshira fil ard. He was walking on the earth. He was present. He was hadir. He was present at the time. It wasn't years later. It was present because they was ready to grab him and jack him up. But they were afraid of the people, so they looked at the people and asked the people, how do y'all see this guy? And they said, of truth, al-haq, huwa nabi, he is the prophet. While he was there. And this is what Muslims have believed for thousands of years. And then, it was another group in the same verse 40 of chapter 7 of the book of John, that said that he is the Messiah. He is the Messiah. And the terminology of Messiah for Muslims and Christians are totally different. Just like many differences of methodologies in the Islamic community and the Christian community are based upon what some take literal, what some take symbolic or metaphorical, or some people, take things in their own context, and even that there's subsects within sets. But the word Messiah, Masa, in Arabia, and I also believe in Hebrew, meant to be anointed. Just to be anointed. So in this verse of chapter 7, verse 40, it says, one group said he's haq, who will not be. He is indeed. He's by truth. In truth, he's the prophet. And then the other group said he is the Messiah. He's the anointed one. And as time went past, he began, Messiah, Jesus, and what was said by many to be the Ibn of Allah. But if that's, for us, the Muslims, that is symbolic. That's not a literal. At the same token, there were, some within that group who questioned that because they said, does the Messiah come from Galilee? We hear you, but, that right there comes about from the mindset of people who who don't appreciate people while they are there on the planet. It takes thousands of years later for people to really appreciate them. So, wanted to kind of deal with those particular areas. Islam is just based upon the premise that we worship God and we don't need to go through any medium. We need to follow the injunctions. It says, take that cross and follow me. Follow me, not worship me. We believe that following the commands, the amra, the instructions, and to follow the prohibitions. So we followed them. And we believe that was the case for all the prophets, that there was a constant. And the constant was that each one said the same thing. Worship God and follow me. Worship God and follow me. Worship God and follow me. That this was the constant. It was said by all of the prophets. And Jesus himself said this when they asked him what the greatest commandments were. We want to say thank you to all of the people. Assalamu alaikum to the different groups, sets and things of that particular nature. Peace, what's up? To my brothers and sisters who have not adopted Islam, who are my brothers and sisters of humanity, how are you? Wish your day well, wish your job well, wish you well for your family. I thank the Most High for another day of Jummah. And I thank the Most High for opportunity to speak to you. Salams to my brothers, to the different groups, man. Stop killing each other. Stop hurting each other. Ego tripping, power tripping, expansion tripping. At the end of the day, you'll regret it years from today. It'll haunt you years from today. You'll wonder why you didn't think the process through. And the worst thing is to hurt that which looks like you. Be aware. Value yourself and value your family and value your people. And know that every action has a reaction, that there's a domino effect. I don't care where you're at. Columbia, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Liberty City, East Orange, Newark, LA, Louisiana. It doesn't matter. Washington State, Texas. It doesn't matter. Arkansas. Whatever you repping, and if you got a lot of hatred and you're repping things to hurt others, It's because something is hurting in you. When I lived that life of self-destruction, it was because I wanted to destroy myself because I hated me, but I was too much of a coward to hurt me. So unfortunately, I would put myself in positions to be hurt, and then self-preservation would kick in, and then I would allow myself to be hurt. Love yourself, and you will see your world in a different view. Love yourself, and you will see people in a different view. You will give them the best situation, even in the worst occasions, and give them the benefit of a doubt. And this is what Allah told the believers in the story of Aisha and the story of Zayd. Her, what they thought. And Allah said, believe in men. Why did you put the best construction on this thought process? Why you didn't think the best? Reprogram the mind to think the best of one another, because for 400 years we've been conditioned to think the worst of one another. We don't trust each other. We don't have no faith, and we are suspicious. And even, I have to say, even when I'm walking about sometimes, if I'm by myself and I see a couple of brothers, younger brothers, my brain snaps like, don't know. Be on your guard. Yeah, be on your G-U-A-R-D guard and not your G-O-D guard. But both are similar homonyms. So with that being said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, maghfirullah. Make dua for me and make dua for my family. And I wanted just to clarify the belief of the Muslim and to those who may be watching. I will be trying to deal with some other areas, books that I translated years ago from Arabic to English to deal with different subjects, and other books that I've written have not published, and I will be dealing with them. Some of them may be on this channel, and some will be on Instagram, as well as trying to establish a podcast by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask you, inshallah, if you can and if you will, contribute to my pages, and so that it's my intention with the barakat of Allah to establish, as I've said before, a halfway house for brothers and sisters who may be re-entering society, and for those brothers and sisters who may be homeless, and to establish some social communities, some hoopties to help the elders get back and forth to work, back and forth to pay their bills, back and forth to get their groceries. These are the things I want to help in the society, and I can't do this alone. So I ask the believers, and I ask the friends, and I ask the family to assist me in this. For the ones who've known me for hundreds of years, my character has been trustworthy. Alhamdulillahi wa Rabbil Alameen. I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this, and I ask you for your assistance. And as we get aging, we are not able to do the strangest things we could when we were young, so that is another factor as well. Make dua for me, make dua for my family, make dua for the believers. Understand that you, as a human being, that your obligation to the Most High is two things: to worship and love Him. To worship and love Him. To worship and to love the Creator. And the second thing is to treat humanity good and to be servants of humanity. And in being servants to humanity, you are fulfilling your worship and your love of the Most High, because that's what He asks us to do, to serve humanity. But I'll add a third thing in that, and the third view that I will add, which is a difficult one for all of us, is to try to make the world, our neighborhood, our community, our family better than what it was when we were born, that we leave it better when we die. I think that's the third thing, that we leave the world a better place when we pass, and that we have a positive legacy, that when we pass, we have provided and done way much more good for humanity and ourselves and our families and our communities than when we were born into it in that situation. May the Creator help us achieve these goals. May He forgive us our sins. May He grant us wisdom and intellect. May He give us the energy, the focus, and the direction in order to achieve these accomplishments. May we not just be selfishly doing things without expanding to our surrounding neighborhoods. In closing, the light bulb does not shine for just itself. The light bulb shines to give light to those within its perimeter, so that they don't stumble into the wall or in the dark, so that their way is illuminated and they can see. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Peace to my brothers and sisters. Have a nice day, man. Rejoice in the life that you have, and the family that you have, and the Creator that you have. With that being said, assalamu alaikum.